Today I've come to the shop of Lyle Poulin, who is a Damascus artist here in Portland, Oregon, and that makes him really unusual to do his own Damascus. So Lyle, you're going to show us a few things today?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, take it away.
Excellent. Well, welcome guys and ladies. This is Hand Forged Shop where we do all of our work.
So a little more about Damascus then.
Yeah, Damascus is a material that's been made by blacksmiths for thousands of years, and it's traditionally been used for making things such as swords, knives, gun barrels, and nowadays it's used in all sorts of decorative ways such as rings, other types of jewelry. Anything that can be made out of metal can be made out of Damascus. What I like to tell folks about the rings that they get from me is that they're literally one-of-a-kind rings, and they're made from scratch, from the raw materials that don't really have much going for them right now sitting on the workbench. But when you take them, bring them together and start forging them together, you can turn it into a really beautiful, really organic material.
Now, are either of these stainless steel, or do you use something different?
No, these are both considered high carbon steel.
So
one of them
they
is
don't have
more,
the chromium then?
They don't have much chromium in them.
Okay.
They may have a little bit, but stainless steel has a lot of chromium, and these have mostly iron carbon and then some small amounts of other elements that are particular to them. Until I make a chunk of material that will be tall enough for our initial billet.
You're checking for impurities to some degree. I saw you scratch something off there.
Yeah, these have been deburred and they've been wiped with acetone, so they're pretty clean. But you don't want any junk getting in between the layers because it can actually inhibit them from welding.
Right.
I've gotten to where I'm at today, where I'm pretty comfortable making Damascus through kind of messing up a lot.
No, nobody ever does that.
When I first started making it, I made a lot of scrap metal. So now you can see we have our layers of blue steel and our layers of nickel steel all stacked up there. So we have about 23 layers. That's pretty good.
Now the blue steel, are you using two pieces there?
Yeah, I doubled up the blue because I want those layers to be a little thicker.
Okay.
So although I'm counting two pieces of
as one layer.
Because in the end they won't have any contrast between them.
You've got a little vise here.
Yeah, this is just going to hold them together. I'm just going to weld them real quickly just to hold them so that they don't move around when I heat them up.
Right.
So right now we're going to use a TIG welder just to do some...
Oh, so that's argon.
This is going to use argon, which is essentially a shielding gas. So I'm just fusing the corners of the layers together right now, and that's going to be just to help hold them together. Essentially a weld along the corner of...
Oh, you went along all of them that fast.
Yeah. So I've gone over all the corners and just essentially melted the steel just so that they can be held next to each other. Then now I'm going to do a bigger weld that's going to run on the side of it. This will keep it from buckling when it heats up. And then I'll flip it over and I'll do another weld on the piece. And all welded onto our 23 layers of tool steel.
And beautifully so. Look at that.
I know.
Yeah. Good
all these welds will be destroyed, but they do look pretty now.
They're beautiful. Okay, next step.
So this here's a propane forge. It essentially is a metal chamber that has insulation on it, usually ceramic, and it means that you can shoot fire into it and it will reflect that heat, and it'll essentially get up to over 2,000 degrees on the inside of it. So it's going to allow us to heat up that bar of metal, get it up so hot that those actual layers of steel want to weld to each other.
So it's just straight propane.
Yeah, this runs on straight propane, and then it draws in air from the shop around. So these
like a little Venturi burner thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll shoot propane in, and then air from the shop kind of gets sucked in there too, and it makes a little flame.
Nice.
I'll fire it up now, but it won't take too long before it's actually up to heat and we can throw our metal in there.
Okay. flame on.
Yeah.
Woohoo! I can feel it.
So it's got 2 burners, and we're essentially gonna let them cook. So it's very important for the very first weld to have all of your layers clean, all of your layers hot, and not let them oxidize. But once they're welded to each other, they should be good to go.
Okay.
So yeah, it's essentially a technique I got from the silversmithing classes I've taken, where you can make a solution of borax and alcohol and then put it on your part, and when the alcohol evaporates, you're left with a nice thin layer of borax on there. I'm just trying to get that that alcohol in between those layers. I'm going to put a little more borax on this later, so we can go over to the forge and see if it'll light.
Okay.
It may not have.
Oh yeah.
So that green color is that borax kind of burning. So now, see all that white stuff? That's going to keep it a little more protected while it's in the fire.
Well, the interesting thing about steel is that it's actually really elastic when it's hot.
Yeah.
Which is really counterintuitive, but it is.
It is.
Because gold is not, and silver is not terribly. It's completely opposite of the non-ferrous metals.
Yeah.
So.
It's going to be, I mean, this thing will make it look like Play-Doh, although if I were hitting it with a hand hammer, it would still seem hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, when that metal is hot, you can essentially squish it.
Make your little tool here?
Yeah, this is a little fire poker.
I see that. Very handy.
I'm going to put my Damascus in the forge and let it warm up now. Center of the fire.
Yes, it is.
And it's going to get up to over 2,000 degrees.
Right.
I'm going to pull out my part, put a little more borax on it. And then I'm putting it back in, and it's going to get brought up to welding heat, which is over 2,000 degrees.
I have to say that my camera is reading it as a little more white hot than it actually is. In real life, what we're looking at is a bit more of a bright orange hot.
So what I can do now is I threw this other bar of metal in that's not quite as hot as I would like it for forge welding, but it's definitely hot enough to preheat the hammer dies. So what I can do with this is just take it over to the press and put it under pressure, and I'm going to let that heat soak into those dies, and it's just going to warm them up so it's not as shocking on the Damascus when I do that weld. That flux in there is boiling, so the borax is literally boiling on the surface of the steel right now. So that's one of the ways that I can know if it's up to temperature is just by how the borax behaves. What we're looking for is for that chunk of metal to be the same color as the inside of the forge, so there not to be any dark spots on the billet. So I want to make sure that the heat is soaked all the way through, all the way to the middle. Okay, I think we're ready to go. The billet's nice and hot. It's been soaking in there. I'm pretty confident that that heat has gone all the way to the middle of the billet. What I'm going to do now is, as quickly as possible, pull it out of there, bring it over to the press, and put it under just enough pressure to get those layers to essentially become one.
Okay.
So here we go.
Here we go. I'll stand out of the way. Would
Yeah.
you call it a cherry red?
I would call it
Beyond cherry, orange red.
heat, yeah.
So it's beyond. Temperature is determined by color in metal, and each one it's a dull red, cherry red, bright red, orange, white. Those are all temperature markers, and so he's working at an orange red, which is super damn hot.
Yeah.
So
if there was a thermometer in there, it would probably read probably between 21 and 2200 degrees Fahrenheit.
right. And
So
that is one more time with Lyle. Off some of the scale that gets on there. It's a flaky surface of burned metal.
So at this point, the billet should be welded together. I'm gonna have to forge this a little bit more to get it down to a smaller dimension. So right now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna grind off this weld material just so that it's not gonna get incorporated into the final piece. So I'll be right back, and
Yeah.
or you can follow me.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm coming with you.
All right. And I'm going to grind this while it's hot, because when it's cold, it's tool steel, so it's going to be much harder to grind.
Oh, go for it. So you can tell it's tool steel by looking at the sparks, right?
Yeah, sometimes tool steel has a much more sparky spark. You can see all the little,
Yeah, oh yeah, that's
the little like explosions that happen.
a little more complex than a mild steel.
So now that weld that was on the surface, I just ground it down. I'm going to be forging it on that edge, and I don't want to hammer that down into the ball.
So Lyle says that he just got this new power hammer this summer. Prior to that, he used an old mechanical power hammer. How old is this old power hammer?
This hammer is supposedly from the 1930s,
Uh-huh.
so it's not quite 100 years old yet.
No,
and
not quite.
It's made in America. It's made in Wisconsin, and
Wow, look at that spring.
it works. It's called a mechanical hammer because it relies on a flywheel moving the hammerhead up and down. So
Wow.
when this is spinning, the hammer lifts up and down, and it'll eventually gather momentum to where, along with this spring, it'll kind of spring up and down and pound the metal.
So now Lyle is this will back up to welding temperature, and he's ready to go for it on the power hammer.
Yep. Cool.
Brand new baby. Let's go. I turned it on its side.
brought it back into a reasonable shape. I was essentially compacting the layers again and also narrowing it down into kind of a regular size. I don't really want it to just, you know, end up whatever size. If I just kept squishing it, it would kind of get wider and wider, so you kind of got to rein it back in a little bit.
Yeah, you're shaping it, sculpting it into a more uniform billet so that when you do your actual pieces, you've got some predictability.
Because at this point, I really need to just stretch out that bar and thin it out. The dies that I have in there now are just two completely rounded dies
Oh, yeah.
that are going to compress the layers and stretch the bar a long ways.
Yeah.
They're going to speed up this next step. I might be able to do it in one heat and draw that bar out from about like 6 or 8 inches where it's at right now to about 16
Wow.
up to 20 inches. We'll see.
It's the same as a cross peen hammer.
Yeah.
If you were doing hand forging, you're just using a cross peen and it compresses and stretches. Okay.
Exactly. So this will be an aggressive way to stretch the bar.
No, this isn't aggressive at all. It up a little bit, any flowing that might have happened from the hammer.
So now it's about a 1/2 inch thick, about 2 inches wide, and it's going to be pretty much ready to cut it apart, stack it on itself, and weld it all over again. That way I'll get it up to about 100 layers total, and from there I can turn it